All right, so 305. I guess we're gonna begin. It's a little bit of a smaller class, but I was hoping. Oh, what? Oh my God, dude! I always forget what time of day it is, and I just say a random time, and it seems to stick. 10:05 is the correct time. A little bit of a smaller class. I was kind of hoping more people would show up, um, because I invited more people to kind of take um, take this opportunity seriously, because this person that we're about to talk to is a very insightful person. Obviously, I
Hmm.
kind of gave you guys advance notice over Blackboard. It is in fact Semmler that we're talking to today. And if you don't know who Semmler is, it happens. You might not know every commentator on the planet, but just to kind of show that he actually does exist and that he is here. Semmler, if you could do a quick wave for us, similar to that. There he is. Um, and the way that this is going to work, we only have Semmler for an hour this time, primarily because there's still stuff that I kind of want to go over for the second hour. So we only have Semmler for 1 hour, as opposed to the section one that kind of got him for like an hour 15, an hour 20, but that's okay. I would just try to get your questions in as soon as possible if you have any, or just kind of let them flow. But the way that it's going to work is I'm going to ask the first question, just to kind of start things off. And then from there, raise your hand. I'll walk around with this headset, and then you can ask a question for whatever it is that you want. Um, Primarily try to focus on commentary, but if, like, some people were asking about the Overwatch League in Section 1 and, like, what are kind of some thoughts about that or whatever. So, well, yeah. Semler, how you doing?
Good. How's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for coming back. You could have just ghosted me after that, but I appreciate you coming back the second time around.
No, come on now. I'm looking
Um,
forward to it. It was fun last time. Lots of fun questions, lots of fun students. I think it was a good experience for everybody.
yeah. So similar to the last time that you were here, I kind of want to start things off with how you got into esports and how you got into commentary. Kind of like what paved your journey to where you are now.
It was pretty much doing what you guys were doing, except that I was working at the time, doing school at night. Dropped out of school, just worked, and played a lot of video games at the time. World of Warcraft was just picking up. Was literally just made pretty much. I think I joined 6 months after it launched. Um, and then played a lot of WoW, played a lot of StarCraft 2 when that came out, League of Legends, and then this game Bloodline Champions came along that felt like the perfect fit, and it was just this awesome game that had a really close knit community, really easy to get into competitive scene where the pros were all playing with the regulars as well, so you could really just get in touch and have these sick servers to get into where you could just really go ham. And so I started casting that game, started competing in that game, and then when I would get knocked out of tournaments, I was complaining so much about how bad the commentators were because at the time there weren't any commentators. So everybody was kind of just winging it, right? It was usually just pros who just got knocked out, and then somebody would be on a stream and we'd be talking about the games, but it wasn't done with any kind of commentary like what you would hear in StarCraft 2 with Tasteless and Artosis, or any of the other games at the time. So that's what I kind of wanted to do, which was to just cast. So I would get knocked out, and I was complaining so much that my friends just told me, you know what, shut up and do it yourself then. And so I did. Started a stream and just started casting games. And from there, the scene grew a little bit, developed. BLC started to get a little bit of traction, and it turns out that they were a Swedish-based company, and so they wanted to run an event at DreamHack. And at the time, DreamHack, summer, winter, that was the hot stuff. That was the place to be. It was pretty much the epicenter of esports at the time. And so getting out there, just put all the money that I had in a plane ticket, spent a week out in Sweden, and went with the attitude, just go balls to the wall. And if something happens, great. If not, I'll have spent a weekend in Sweden. It'll have been awesome. Turns out something did happen. I met quite a few people there, which is why I still always give the advice to anybody who wants to get into the industry or who's interested by it that you guys should go to every event you possibly can and network and figure out where people hang out and then go get to know them. Have a chat with them at the bar. Hotel bars are usually the place because people are obviously staying in hotels. They're flying in, so they're usually at the hotel bars. So if you figure out where the hotel bar is, then you know where most people are going to be at the end of the night, and then you go and you mingle and you get to know people, and through that you can then have opportunities, right? Like with anything else, you get opportunities. And so by managing to meet James Harding at the time, he brought me over, we hit it off, and then kind of just rolled from there. Kept doing events, moved to Sweden to start the Good Studio with him and a few others. We just rented a house, barely made it, just literally going check to check for months on end, just trying to make everything work because we just built this studio and then hit the ground running. And from there, that allowed me to have the room necessary to do CSGO commentary. Before that, it was Dota. Before that, it was StarCraft 2, hosting and interviewing, some StarCraft 2 commentary. But I kind of just bounced around and then eventually landed on CSGO. And CSGO is where I think I made most of my name for myself. Obviously, esports wasn't as big back then, and so the Good Studio was pretty much like the biggest podcast at the time, the Good Show. We were just going ham. But it was when CSGO happened, I think, with CSGO Lounge and the tournaments and the major system that Valve implemented, that's when things really took off and blew up for esports, I think. That was right about the time that League of Legends was picking up as well. And you really got to see both side by side just explode in terms of viewerships and player base. And that's kind of I was lucky enough to see the renaissance, I guess is what I call it, the second coming of esports. Because without Twitch, none of this would have been possible. Twitch had to happen at the time that it did happen for everything to come together and allow for the streamers, for the tournament organizers, for us to be able to run our own tournaments and stream it. And so we could get sponsors involved all of a sudden. And then there was a little bit of money that you could make to keep doing tournaments. And so Twitch completely changed the game as soon as Twitch came out, or when we figured out, hey, we can use Justin. And then Twitch figured out, hey, we have a lot of people streaming games on Justin. Why don't we do this other platform and we'll just name it Twitch? As soon as Twitch came around, that pretty much revitalized esports and allowed it to go where it is today. So I'm lucky enough to have been at the very beginning of this renaissance of esports, I guess, that's allowed us to have everything that we have today and do everything that we do today. So that's kind of the broad strokes from beginning to where we are. Yeah. I mean, I'm still living in Sweden. I'm still commentating. I'm still hosting. I'll probably be hosting an event in December just to keep my hand in it. Have some fun. That was some advice that I gave at the last class, which is never turn down a gig if you got the time for it. Doesn't matter if it's commentary or not. Do everything that you've got. Do all the roles that you possibly can to get as much experience as you possibly can, because everything will always benefit one and the other. Commentary is kind of a thing that you just don't turn off because everything can feed into commentary. So even when you're reading a book or watching a movie, hanging out with your friends, you should be backlogging everything. Watching sports, watching other sports, you should be backlogging everything to be like, how can I use that for commentary? And so just do all the gigs and get all the experience that you can.
Now, for some of us, well, not all of us, but for some of the students, they might want to become commentators, but this is kind of like their first dip in the pool. And traditionally, sports tries to kind of put us in this cookie cutter mold of like play-by-play and color. Is there? I know that obviously you talk a lot about the ebb and flow and kind of there is no play-by-play and there is no color. But for someone starting out, is there a specific role do you think someone should kind of gear more towards and practice more, or kind of get their feet wet a little bit more acquainted with?
Yeah, do what comes naturally to you. If you like talking about numbers and breaking down strats and the idea of watching a demo for 3 hours a day just to break down this one little detail, right? If all that is what grips you, then make yourself an analyst, make yourself a color commentator, right? You got if picking apart the strategies of a particular team really gets you going, then focus on that. Play to your strengths. Don't try and be the funny guy or the energetic guy if you don't necessarily do that. Or if you can, that's where it gets into flow. Or let's say if you are that energetic guy, always want to be the center of attention, all that sort of stuff, right? Then maybe, play-by-play is for you. That'll be like the easier path. But this is what I was telling the class last time is just when you're doing commentary, anything that's on camera, just focus on being yourself as close as possible. Just be yourself. Don't put on a face. Don't put on a mask that, I'm going to try and do this or like be this person or be more like this person or whatever. Like, don't do that. Stick to yourself and stick to what gets you going, because the one thing that resonates with people on a stream is whether or not you're genuine. And if you're genuinely interested in what you're talking about or how you're going about it, then that resonates with them, and then they'll want to hear more of what you have to say. So at least when you're getting into it at the beginning, I was lucky with BLC because I played the game so much and I played against the pros that I knew all the details about it, so I could do both. I just naturally liked color or naturally liked play-by-play, but I could do color as well because I knew the game so well, and I was playing it at I'm not going to say the pro level, but I was playing it at a high enough level to be able to speak with authority on what was actually going on. So that was if the best case scenario is you find a game like that that you really enjoy to the point where you're willing to put the hours in and understand it as best you possibly can, so that you can provide the color when the color happens. But then, if if you want to go more play by play, you still got that color in the back of your head. But all this kind of turns into just focus on being yourself and finding a game that you really enjoy and can put the hours into, because then the color will happen naturally. There is just do what's comfortable for you. There is no rule book. That's what we proved in CS:GO, in terms of commentary, in terms of what I call flow commentary, which is you got no role, and you don't need a role necessarily. You can fall back on those roles, but I think personally the supreme form of commentary, at least the one that we've figured out so far, is the flow kind of commentary, where you can have the play-by-play and you can have the color. That person can be the same person, and then it just turns into a conversation between two friends or two partner, or two commentators, right? And I think that's a much more entertaining form of commentary for the viewers and for the commentators, rather than being fixed into these roles that might limit your creativity and limit you in a way. I don't think that we really need to have those roles anymore in commentary. Some games still do, but I like doing it I guess, my way.
Now, like I said, just raise your hand if you have a question at any point. Don't feel like you have to wait for him to finish or for me to finish or whatever. At any point, just raise your hand. To kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, I want to ask, because there's a lot of commentators, and you even said yourself in the first class that you base a lot of your commentary off of tasteless and artosis, that you kind of really kind of started to follow the mold of what somebody had already kind of created. You say be yourself. When do you cross the line and kind of start to pick up things from other commentators?
What I mean by that is that they had fantastic fundamentals for commentary, but not only that, they also had fantastic brand building fundamentals. And so there was little things like, little things that sound little but are very important actually for commentators, I think. And Tasteless and Artosis were the first guys that I really noticed doing that in the world of commentary. Is let's say your co-commentator tells a joke and you miss the point. Doesn't matter if you find it funny or not, laugh, because that's the cue for everybody else to laugh, and you're not letting your co-commentator fall flat on his face, unless you got a joke wrapped in there that's going to counter it up, obviously. But like, one subtle thing that a lot of commentators miss out on is when their co-commentator says something, they make a joke or whatever, maybe they like hesitate, or maybe they let it hang there. Just just laugh, because you guys are a team, you guys are supporting each other. Another thing that Tasteless and Artosis did was that they always said each other's names constantly. There's like, Artosis, I think that's a great idea. Oh, Tasteless, you're ridiculous. Like stuff like that, right? They're always saying each other's names. Why? Because somebody tuning into the stream may not know, they may be new to the stream, or they may not know who's on the mic. Constantly saying each other's names just reinforces, these are the guys that I'm listening to. And so that's really good fundamentals in commentary, is that you should always be building each other up and trying to make information like that, just small little details like that, make information like that readily available to the viewers, so that they not, it doesn't happen often enough that they either see us on camera or see a nameplate saying, who's casting the match. And so if I'm constantly always saying, hey, Hex, I think this or that, yeah, Hex, I'm constantly saying Hex, Hex, Hex. It's not, I could obviously say like you all the time, but it's like, yeah, Hex, man, you really got this, right? Like it allows for people to just pick up on who's behind the mic, and you get a good play, they're gonna stick that name to that play, and then you're gonna go from there and have a bigger brand, or your brand should grow, because more people will know who it is they're actually listening to. So those are the kinds of things that, if you're listening to other commentators, pay attention to what the other commentators are saying. I noticed that in sports they don't, or at least the sports that I listen to, usually I even mute the commentary these days, but like in the sports that I listen to, I don't necessarily hear sports commentators doing that a lot, saying each other's names. I'm often wondering who's on the mic, who's, unless it's, like, okay, inside the NBA or something where, it's Charles and Shaq, right, and all that. Okay, cool. But you usually see them on camera when those guys are on. But when it comes to sports commentators, no idea who's on the mic. That's something that's unique to esports, is that esports in esports, commentators can sometimes be just as important as the players in a way for the broadcast, because people know, these are my favorite commentators. Great, they're going to listen. Whereas in sports, I don't think that it's often as, or at least from the sports commentators that I've spoken to, I feel like they don't have quite as much brand, and they're not pushed in that way. They haven't necessarily fought for it in that way, where it's very different from sports to esports. So Tasteless and Artosis, we learned a lot from them right at the beginning on how to build your brand and how to grow as commentators.
Cool. We do have our first question over here.
Hello. Yeah, just making sure it's not too loud.
Hey, man. How's it going?
Good. How are you? I was just wondering, with your wealth of knowledge and insight you have now with the industry, what's one thing you would do differently, or a piece of advice you'd give to the younger version of yourself to either change something you did that you thought you could do this differently now?
Yeah, that's an insightful question. I'm not really known for my personal insight. Hold on, let me see. I got to think a little bit on that one. Because hmm. Well, that's an interesting question because I think I would go back to my later self and tell myself to trust the others more around me. So to trust your team and who you're working with, right? Um, and so that could be your co-commentator. I learned that lesson afterwards, after Anders and I separated in a way, or when Anders and I were together towards the tail end of that, is where I learned that I needed to place more trust, perhaps, in my co-commentators and the people around me, because I was so focused. So you can get really tunnel vision, right? When you're focused on a goal, and my goal was to just be the best commentator I possibly could be, and to eventually try and make it to the top. And so I was just, everything was on that. And I was just completely focused 100% on that. And I perhaps wasn't the easiest person to work with because of that. There was an arrogance that comes with that kind of that. So, I'm wondering if that's the best advice, because when you talk about it, it feels like you need that kind of single-minded focus and burn and desire to make it to the top of the field, because everybody's gunning for that top spot. And if you aren't in the race 100%, you're probably not going to make it, right? And so I think that it is necessary to have that confidence and that arrogance and to just go for it, right? But at the same time, I'm pretty sure it would probably cost me some friendships, or at least has probably slowed things down as well along the way, where perhaps I rubbed people the wrong way, or it didn't work out. And so maybe try and go back to my past self and tell him to be a bit more aware of the people around him, to make sure that everybody's on board. All of the leadership lessons that I've learned over the years now, man, if I could start out with that, if I was back in the good studio days with all of the ideas of have more trust, have more faith, decentralized command, try and own everything around you. Do not blame anything on anybody else. Assume total ownership of anything in the broadcast. It doesn't matter if it's the producer's fault, you think, or the audio guy's fault because he had a hot mic or whatever. Doesn't matter whatever's going on. Own it. It's your responsibility. And that's where the buck stops. It stops with you. After that, if everybody has that mentality and you manage to train that mentality with the others, then problems get solved. Because it's not just a pointing fingers at everybody like, oh man, you should have done this better, you should have done that better. It's like, no, I could have done this better because maybe I could have informed you better, told you better of like what to do, or like what I was going to do or what I needed from you. I could have communicated better, right? This is on me. And you see all of a sudden it takes the person off the defensive. It puts them in the situation where like, okay, maybe I could have done better. And then all of a sudden you're solving problems. You're not constantly going at each other, which has really been a thing in esports for a long time. Is people, they don't. Esports is a lot of people who kind of just jumped in for passion, but they were never trained for it. They never went to school for it. They just kind of, you had a tech wizard who just lived making PCs and figuring out the best streaming things. Then he gets hired by Twitch, and all of a sudden, he's working in these massive companies. And maybe he didn't have that trained structured path, or the producers. Most of them have to wear 5 hats. They all learned it themselves, and so they're not trained, right? And so sometimes you have these situations where, well, a lot of the times you have these situations where it can get into pointy fingers at people not taking responsibility and trying to put the responsibility on others. That's probably the advice I would go back to myself and give immediately right now if I could, which is those very points right there in terms of taking ownership and taking responsibility for everything around you. Because I think if I had that in the good studio days, that could have been really interesting. But if I had that at the beginning of Room on Fire, I think Room on Fire could have really been something special. And I think I kind of threw it away because I was still in that bitchy mode where I was still pointing fingers at others instead of taking responsibility myself. So that's probably the bit of advice that I would go back and give myself. Absolutely.
That's really good advice because he's a league player, so he should really stop blaming his teammates and start looking at himself.
That's the worst, man. Could you have worded better? Could you have been there 5 seconds earlier, right? Also, there's a lot of things that Dota and League guys, oh, it's your fault. It's like, nah, I'm pretty sure you could have done something more to help or done your job better, right? Same with CS, except in CS you can carry a bit more, and so I think it makes up for that a little bit. But League and Dota, man, it's such a hard game to play for me. That's a rough one.
We do have another question.
For sure.
Hey, it's Evan.
Hey, what's up, man? How's it going?
Oh, I'm fantastic today. I
Good.
was just wondering, what was the greatest challenge you faced on your journey to becoming a caster?
Let's see. It was never casting. I always loved that. That was never a challenge. That was always fun. I think it was trying to the greatest challenge that any on talent, especially on screen talent, any commentator um, has to face is I think losing anonymity. And that's one facet that doesn't really get thought about much when you're trying to get into this, because obviously you're thinking, oh man, I got to, like, this is what I mean, you're striving. You need a bigger brand. You need to be famous in order to get gigs, and so so it goes in there, and you're always thinking that, right? But I think the biggest challenge is dealing with the fact that you never have anonymity anymore, and that you're going to be constantly judged by people who don't have the full picture, and that can be a very frustrating thing when, for whatever reason, something goes wrong on the stream or you're having a rough day. Two things, right? One thing is casters never get a day off. Doesn't matter if you're sick or anything's gone. If you're hired for a show and you're there to do that gig, you're going to do that gig and you're doing that show. You're showing up, whether you're sick, you didn't get sleep, you didn't have enough to eat, you didn't, whatever reason, doesn't matter. Get on screen and do your job and be good at it too, right? And so there is that's a challenge every day that you have to go in, because sometimes you're depressed, sometimes you've had a terrible day, and sometimes, like me, a few years ago, my biggest challenge was dealing with personal loss in my family and my friends, and then having to still try and run room on fire and still be on stream. And the community sensed that, right? They sensed that something was wrong because I wasn't telling anybody about it, but they sensed something was wrong because my casting was off. And then, they shift obviously over to, hitting you pretty hard because they're like, oh, Semmler, he's a has-been, oh, he sucks and all that. And you have all this stuff that's going on that you don't necessarily want to make public. And so you're trying to find a way to stick it out, to tough it out. And so casters, I think the biggest challenge that casters face is not getting burnt out and knowing when to take a step back and not get overwhelmed by things. Instead of just thinking more work will solve it, knowing when it's a good time to take a step back and breathe a little bit and try and figure out that work-life balance. It's probably the biggest challenge for commentators today, I think.
I think we have another question, but I think Machine talks
Shoot.
a lot about that in terms of like just have to commentate every single day and like flying around and just lots of jet lag, and like the caster life is very difficult, especially if you have to move from country to country, right?
It's a lot of a feeling of I mean, when you're the caster life and you're freelance as well, another thing that's always going through your head, and this is what happens why you get burnout in some of these freelance driven games, is because you're always thinking, well, if I say no to that event, then somebody's going to come in and take my job, and maybe they don't hire me again next time. And so you're always dealing with these feelings of not insignificance. You're not up to snuff. Maybe you're not good enough, and so you may leave the door open, and that could come back to bite you, because then maybe you lose a tournament. And so you have to have rock solid confidence in yourself if you're a commentator, because you need to trust that if you're not there for an event, it's fine. You'll be there for the next one, right? And then the next one and the next one, and you're going to keep going. But there is definitely you don't, I mean, I've got gray hair now, and I've had gray hair since I was like 28 now because of the stress that you're under when you're traveling, constantly traveling. I spent 300 days out of the year on the road. So you're living out of a hotel room pretty much perpetually. You're constantly time zone different, so you're not ever getting proper sleep. You're most likely not eating well because you're eating venue food or hotel food, so it's all trash. And then you're working. You're trying to work long days with the commentary, especially at the beginning, where you're casting 8 hours a day at least. And so then it's just constant grind, constant drain on your energy. And so you're never really getting back up to 100%. Even the week-long break between, you're maybe only just getting back up to 60%, and then you got to go on the next one. And so commentators are always living on this edge of trying to just get a little bit of energy back, and just trying to maintain it, because there's all these drains that are constantly draining your energy level. So yeah, those guys they're rocks, man. They're really tough, the CS guys, because it's not easy. It's not easy to stay on the road that long and to keep working that long, even though they're making plenty of money. I mean, you got to ask yourself these questions, but yeah, they're making scratch, man. But you're always like, oh, but they're a little bit more scratch, a little bit more money. But they're doing their thing.
Okay, next question.
Hi. You kind of already
Hello.
answered it, but my question is, how do you manage your doubts? Like, what do you do to kind of hype yourself back up and get yourself motivated to keep going and keep doing the job every single day?
Surround yourself with good people if you can, because that's going to be your support crew. It kind of comes back over time. You're going to take hits, right? You're going to take hits. You're going to have moments when you doubt yourself. You're going to have moments where you're low energy, where you're just completely drained. And you just have to have that confidence that I was talking about. There's a bit of an egomania. There's a bit of an arrogance that you have to be able to believe that you can be the best at something and to just keep going regardless of what anybody else has to say, because they don't know what's going on in your head. So if you have a vision for where something needs to go and you believe in it, execute it regardless of what anybody else is saying behind you, right? Because you're always going to have people who are going to try and take you down, either because they're not doing what they want to be doing, and so they're looking at you with envy, and they're thinking, oh, he's doing what he wants to be doing, so, but I'm not doing that. And so that's the majority of online criticism, essentially, is a bunch of people who are just who are not living out what they would think, I think, is their ideal life. And so they're going to hit you with everything they've got to try and make you feel terrible because they feel terrible. And so you're always reminding it. I mean, that's something that you learn very quickly with Reddit and social media. You learn very quickly to just kind of distance yourself from that and to not take it seriously, because most of the time, the great thing with commentary and with popularity or with hate and love and all that sort of thing is that a lot of the time the commentators are doing the exact same thing. They're getting praised. They're doing the exact same thing the next day when they're getting hated. But for whatever reason, they're getting, it just changes. All, 1 week to another, you could be the most beloved commentator in the world, and the next week maybe you screwed up a cast, or maybe you did something, or maybe the guy just woke up and had a terrible day and he decided, hey man, I hate what Semmler's doing. I'm gonna send him tweets and all this sort of stuff, right? And you're still doing the exact same thing that you're doing week to week, but the public changes on its opinion. I don't know if you follow CS:GO, but Chad right now is getting blasted by the Reddit community just because he decided to put himself out there, and he's not bowing down, to these people. He's actually just calling them out and saying, hey, stop. But it was funny because he was struggling a bit with it in Turkey. We talked a bit about it, and I was like, don't worry, man, you'll be fine. 2 years from now, you'll be a king. You just got to wait it out. Because, I come back out of nowhere, and all of a sudden the CSGO Reddit are just loving me when, 2 years ago they were absolutely hating me. So it's just it's a weird thing how it works in the public eye. And so the lesson that you learn is you distance yourself from the public opinion, and you glance at it, you keep an eye on it, but you don't take it seriously per se, and you don't really let that define you. Because if you let that define you, if you're doing this to be loved, or if you're doing it for those sorts of reasons, right, to be loved, to be popular, to all that, you're doomed. Because when that time comes, when the community turns on you for whatever reason, you'll lose it, right? You're not going to have that faith in yourself because you were doing it for them, and if they hate you, right? Something's wrong. What you need is to just be firm in the belief that what you're doing is what you want to be doing. You're confident in what you're doing. You're doing it well. You can get better, but you're doing it well, or as well as you can, and just hold on to that faith. And that's what gets you through the rough times. It's knowing that you're good at what you do. That's why they pay you. That's why you're there. If you weren't there, well, then, yeah.
All right. Got another question over here.
Hello.
I think what a lot of young people these days are struggling with is, like, if they want to get into the esports scene as a career, they kind of struggle to convince, like, their friends or family or parents or whatever it is, like, that there is opportunity here and, like, that you can turn it into a career. So I guess what my question is, did you ever find that struggle? I'm not sure how old you were when you were trying to get into it, but did you ever find that struggle? And if you did or didn't, how did you kind of convince your family members and your friends, like, that there was opportunity here and that you wanted to do this?
That's a good question. I almost believe that it might be easier today than it was when I started, because when I started, there was no money, and it was just this new thing like Twitch and whatever, right? And my parents were like, what in the hell are you doing? And, but again, I think this ties into the comment into what, this ties into what I was talking about earlier, just now is that, you just have to have faith in what you're doing, man. You got to believe in it. And if you believe in it, you'll find a way to make money doing it. It's a lot of the time people fail, and they fail because they didn't put everything they had into it. I didn't leave myself the option either. I spent all my money on a one-way ticket to Sweden, packed 2 bags, and said, "Okay, I'm going, and I'm not coming back." Like, there's no option. There was no back out plan. There was no option to fall back on. I couldn't have helped. Like, I was to the point where I made it. I made the case to the point where I'm not allowed to fail in this, and I'm not coming back without having succeeded. And so you got to put your back to the wall and get out there and do it. And your parents will understand. Your parents are just trying to protect you. I mean, obviously they've raised you this whole time. So good parents are always just going to be trying to protect you. But good parents will also recognize when you got to take a risk, or when, you know, it's time for you to get out there. And for me, I was 21-ish when I fully committed, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I mean, I was a little older, right? If my kid was 17 or 18, I might be a little bit more leery. But I mean, I'd worked for 3 years before then. I'd be working. I mean, I dropped out of college basically around 19. So I mean, I've been working for a while before then. And I mean, to any of you who have wonders, right? You know, it's like I dropped out of high school and I dropped out of college, and I just worked, and I really just worked. And then I found something I wanted to do, and I went for it 100%, and I didn't let anything hold me back. And it worked, right? And there are a lot of guys like that in this industry who don't have formal education and who just saw an idea and they went for it, and they went hard. But I think the only bit of advice that I can give you is, if they see, like my parents saw, that you are 100% committed to what you're doing, then I think it could be an easier sell for them than if they thought that you were just doing this because you didn't want to do anything else, or like you didn't want to do anything serious or whatever, right? You know what I mean? Like if you were doing it half-assed, I think then they could have a cause for concern. But I think if you see somebody fully committing, no holds barred to something, I think that makes it easier for the parents. And so, I mean, now for the esports industry, man, I mean, I talked a little bit about this last time. That's kind of why I opened up with don't say no to any jobs. I mean, there are so many opportunities now, whether it be through tournament organizers, through teams, through game devs now. I mean, everybody, there are so many jobs out there now, and journalistic websites. I mean, get your foot in the door. No matter what you got to do, get your foot in the door. Apply to everything. Don't just send one application. Apply to everything. Take the first thing you get, because that's your foot in the door. And from there, you're going to get your experience. You're going to make your connections. You're going to network, and then the next opportunity that gets you closer to your goal comes up, and then you take that one, and you just fully commit and keep going. Don't think that you're going to go into it and immediately get the job that you wanted. I was doing interviews and hosting and podcasting and stuff like that for a couple of years before I really took off with CSGO commentary. And I was doing everything I could just to get experience, just to work with anybody I could, work with different producers, work with different games, work with anything I could think of that could get me better and get me more of a network to keep pushing. So that's my advice there, is to just show that you're fully committed to something, and I think you'll get the support.
We do have another question, but I kind of wanted to add on to what you were saying. To kind of even aid to that, is that the esports network is so small compared to every other industry. You'll get there really fast, especially now since, well, I mean, the jobs are growing, but the community is still small enough that you could network incredibly fast and you can get to the end very quickly. I mean, it's still going to take years of grinding, but you'll know who the person is that you want to reach within like a year, like very, very quickly. But anyways, next question.
So just wanted to point out, one of the notable parts of your career is you started off at Counter-Strike, or not started off, but you had well-known in Counter-Strike, and you transferred to Overwatch. And a wonderful part of our industry is that there's brand new games coming out every day. So I was just wondering, what are the steps you take, or the sort of order of operations you go through every time a brand new game is coming out, to prepare yourself to cast these new games, or even games that you're unfamiliar with and need to cast for a gig?
Well, okay. So now what I have, and this is actually Joe Miller, commentator, used to be a commentator for Quake CS 1.6. Now he runs talent for ESL. He talked about this. It was called a skeleton. And essentially what you're doing when you're first starting out with commentary is you have a skeleton. And you're just a skeleton when you first start out. You got no flesh, no bone, no nothing on you, no fat, no weight to you. You're just this, you think you know what you're doing, but you're flimsy. And as you get more experience, you put on more and more weight on that skeleton until you fleshed out the skeleton, until you've figured out, okay, this is how I do a handoff, and this is how I hand over to an interview, and this is how I talk with my producer. And each one of these blocks is like a muscle that you're putting on that skeleton, to the point where when you get into a new game, you're already, once you have that skeleton built in terms of all the experience of how to run a show as a commentator, well, then you can very easily take that formula, that skeleton that you've built up now into a body, and move it over to another game. And after that, what you're doing is you're just plugging in data. And so you're going in, say when I took Overwatch, I had like a stack like this of flashcards. I'd written down every ability, every hero, every ability, every player for every team, along with name, age, where they're from, that sort of thing, right? Relevant data. I was just sitting there going through flashcards. I would be in every day I would go through the flashcards once or twice, and things that I could remember, they'd go into the separate stack that I only needed to review once a week, right? And it's like usual learning methods, right? In terms of like preparing or cramming for a test. So I would be doing stuff like that, find the details that you're then going to hand over to the body of your commentary that you're going to be able to use in your commentary. And so when you're approaching a different game, you got to like the game. It's because it's not going to be fun if you don't like the game, and people are going to know you're not having fun if you don't like the game. And so you'll naturally want to, if you enjoy the game, you'll naturally want to put the time into it, learning the details that you need. To really do an excellent job at commentating a game. But when it comes to switching games around, I could go and cast any game right now if I wanted to. I could literally just go and sit down, not know anything about the game, and start casting. Because what I'll do is I'll stick to the fundamentals of commentary, and I'll pick up on what's happening in front of me, because usually games have systems. Us as gamers, we get trained very early on to recognize certain systems in games. That's why you can pick up a different game. And for us, it's like for somebody who doesn't play any games at all, they'll look at the screen and be like, I don't know what's going on. I'll look at the screen and be like, okay, hold on. They're using this system here. This is something I learned in this game. They're doing this over here. This is something I learned in that game. Cool. Put it all together. Great. Now I know how the game works, right? You'll pick up on games much faster. And so rely on building out your all of your experience with the different facets of production. And then you can go from game to game to game to game and just flesh it out as you go, depending on the game that you need or that you run into. I don't know if that's is that what you were asking about, or were you asking more about like preparation for a game? Or
He gave me a thumbs up from across the room. So
okay, cool. I mean, preparation never hurts. The more time you have before an event, the more time you have to delve into players. Or what I'll do sometimes is I'll just hit up other commentators. I'll be like, hey man, you've worked on this game, or you know these players' history. Can you fill me in a little bit? Can you give me a crash course on this one guy? This thing was interesting. I know you casted that game or whatever, right? Like you'll just pass around, because commentators, we all have Discords and stuff. We'll like talk to each other and figure things out sometimes if we need to. And so, yeah, it's very much just get your fundamentals down pat, and then you can just basically plug in the data as you need it.
So we have time for maybe like 2 or 3 more questions, and since there's no hands up right now, I'll ask the same question I asked last class, which was the trifecta question: what should commentators think about when it comes to agents? What should commentators think about when it comes to contracts? And then the per event or per rate kind of hour for starting out commentators, what should they kind of think about, or how should they value themselves when they're negotiating with a TO or with an event or with like an agency to kind of get a gig?
Well, you're going to do a lot of work for free at first, because you're going to be getting experience. Think of yourself as an intern. A lot of the work that you're going to do is probably just streaming on your own. And so when it comes to the hourly rate, at first you're going to just take whatever you can get, because it's more valuable. Yes, okay, the exposure meme of look at all this food that I made with this exposure money, that this exposure that you didn't pay me, right? You saw that meme going around. Yes, okay, that's fair. That does happen. You do not want to work for free, but at the very beginning, you're going to take gigs for a rate. You'll do that gig, and what will happen is that you'll talk with the other commentators. You're going to talk with the people that are there, and you're going to get an idea of, oh wait, hold on, so this is kind of what the industry is at right now, or this is what they're making, this is where I shape up, what can I use to compare myself to the others, right? And you'll figure out your value as you go along. So I believe that a lot of the money questions kind of just come with time naturally, because the more people you get exposed to, the more commentators you get exposed to, the more information you'll get, and they'll kind of hand that over to you. Agents, I mean, there's no real, I don't believe in agents in esports yet. There's not enough money to make it valuable for them in terms of commentators and on-screen talent. I mean, we're not making millions. So where the money is right now in the industry for agents is with the teams and with the TOs. And even the TOs, not so much. It's really the teams, and let's say the teams and the streamers. the casual streamers, right? That's where the money's at for agents. For us, I mean, if you get an agent, what's going to happen is that they'll probably negotiate for you, but usually you can negotiate for yourself. What they'll probably be doing is just looking over the contract. But you can hire a lawyer to do that for, $100, not even, depending, right? You can hire a lawyer to do that, or even have your parents, even have your dad look at it and just be like, hey, does this look all right to you? To me, it feels fine. Nothing went wrong with my gut. Like my gut isn't telling me that something's off here, and go for there, because we're not signing these big contracts yet. Or let me put it this way: if you're starting out as a freelancer, you might not even have a contract. But if you do have a contract, you're probably just getting a contract for an event. It's not like you're signing your life away for 3 years like some of these players are who are getting screwed over. For the commentary and the interviewing, the hosting roles, I don't think that you really need an agent. I think what needs to happen is you need to get out there and just hustle and build a brand for yourself. None of us coming up had agents. Today, I don't even have an agent, and most of the guys that I know don't have agents either. It's just that you get the network, and once you have your own network, like your professor said, it's such a small ecosystem that once you start knowing the people who actually make the decisions, you're gonna get to know them faster and better. And then, what do you need an agent for anyway? You're gonna know who you need to talk to and who's handling what, and so you'll go directly to that person and get the job done. The agent is just a useless middleman who's going to try and take 10% off you, if you're lucky. So I wouldn't say that. I mean, have a good lawyer, and if you're in a jam, you got guys like Bryce, like Esports Law or others. Reach out to them. If it's a contract you want looked at, here, can you take a look at this contract? Does anything stand out to you? Good, cool, fine, done. That's all you really need. And past that, I mean, just be sensible. Get experience. You're going to get burned. It happens to everybody. You're going to get burned. Just don't get discouraged when you do get burned. Learn from it and move on.
Okay, so Evan, you have the last question. Make it a good one.
No pressure, dude.
All right. Oh, now you're making me double think my question. Okay, so maybe during a game when like a team fight has just ended or something, what are some topics you should talk about like after those team fights?
Okay, that was pretty good.
Yeah. What you're usually doing? I mean, what you want to try to avoid falling into, the trap of falling into it, is just recapping what happened every time. It's nice to recap every now and again, but you don't know, like, what you're trying to do is what you're really trying to do if you're on your game is you're trying to point out something that needs to happen going into the fight. And if you can point out something that needs to happen, then the audience have something to look for in that fight. And depending on how chaotic the fight is, right? If it's Overwatch, they definitely need help looking at what they need to be keeping an eye on. And if it's CS, maybe not, a little less. But you're trying to find a key part of the fight or the moments that you want the audience to pay attention to. And then in an ideal world, you nailed it and you're going into it and you can see, I'm like, look, see, there. That happened, and this was the result, and now we can start planning for the next one, trying to find that next key, and you keep going down the line like that. After the fight, I mean, that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for like the one key thing that might have gone right or gone wrong that you want to emphasize on, and it's also a chance to star build, which is what I usually try to do, which is I try to give praise as much as possible to players who, like, it's something that's commentators, I've had so many players come up to me and tell me this, where it's like, man, I really appreciate you hyping up that play for me like that, man. People really loved it, and it gives them confidence, and it makes them feel good, and it gets them attention, and it gets them fans, and they benefit. And that's a responsibility of a commentator, is to really, I think, more often than not, try and praise and try and just hype up a player, shout their name right when the play happens, Dupree, or like Hiko or whatever, right? Like, shout their name and try and get that link to, this hype thing is happening, and it's because of this guy right here, and you need to pay attention to this guy right here. That would be one of the things that I keep in mind a lot when I'm doing the commentary like that, is try and hype up the players and try and get them to have fun. I mean, same could be said. I mean, sometimes you have to call out players for making, but if you're going to call out a player, try and make it for something that's like very obvious, right? Because a lot of the time there's things that these players are doing, unless you're bang on your read, they may be doing it for something that you're unaware of. And so it's a little bit more difficult for commentators to criticize players unless it's really dumb stuff like going off hunting alone with an AWP against a save round. I mean, then roast that player all day. But if it's like a small thing, it's better to praise the player than to find the player that deserves praise over the player who has screwed up. Make that the focus. Try and make it a positive thing, and that way you're growing these players, and you're growing these players in the esteem of the audience, and you're hopefully helping them to grow their brands, so that obviously they become more valuable to their teams. You are in some ways responsible for that as a commentator. You do have to take that into account when you're trying to grow everything, right? You're trying to help everything move and make it as popular as possible, and growing the players is a part of that. So I tend to try and focus on that, and then you got time, fit a good joke in there. That's what Hex and I like to do.
All right. Before we kind of wrap things up, is there a way that the students can kind of reach you if they have more questions, or if they can just tweet you out or email you? Or?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Twitter is not something that I check religiously, but I do have it. And in Twitter, something I do check is my email. So if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to reach out on the email. I'm always checking. I'm always answering. If you do, send me a message. And yeah, hit me up if you guys find yourselves in those sorts of situations where you're like, okay, I have a chance to get hired for this. I'm not sure, whatever. Shoot me an email. Ask me my advice. I can probably help you better than in a general sense where it's like I'm generally saying don't have an agent. But if you get caught in a sort of situation like that, yeah, shoot me an email. Or if you want a question, or if you have a question that didn't occur to you now, maybe you didn't have time, send it my way. And I'm always available, always. So feel free to hit me up.
Cool. Well, on that point, 1, 2, 3. I want everyone to say thank you, Semmler. So 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Semmler. Come on, guys, we can do a little bit better than that. 1,
Thank you very much, everybody.
3. Thank you, Semmler. That was better. That was a lot better.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for giving us the call, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Huh? Have a good day.